Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here, and I'm glad to be with you today to talk about another subject which I don't know whether you'll be interested in or not, but we'll have this conversation regardless. And as always with any of the conversations that I have no bloody idea what I'm going to be talking about really. But I've been thinking a lot about change and systems in which we like to see change occur. And there are many systems in my world that I would like to see change. One of those, of course, is the child protection system, in which I do a lot of work as a president of the Child Protection Party. But one of the things that occurred to me recently is that we effectively attempt to bring about change by confronting the system and the people that work within the system, particularly, because systems in themselves, let's face it, are constructed of people. Just like organisations, even though legally they try to be defined as an entity, the reality is that it's just a group of people making decisions about how the rest of us should behave and live our lives, as do parliamentarians. And the frustration for me has been that we continually push against systems that will not change. So in other words, the people within those systems are resistant to any form of change. And it fascinates me at the moment that we're seeing so much aggro in terms of the vaccination, the anti-vaxxers getting out there and pushing their agenda, the politicians out there pushing theirs, and that those people that are pushing against the political view around vaccinations seem to be a very loud, boisterous sort of a group for which they will not be able to change anything, but they are at least out there trying to convince people of their point of view. And in doing so, they perhaps may persuade others to believe whatever it is that they believe, and that they agitate in a way which is loud, boisterous, and often sometimes destructive. And but at least I guess they're out there advocating for their point of view. And, you know, when it comes to freedom of speech, all power to them, because every one of us should have that right to be able to talk about things openly, providing they're not offensive or harmful to others. So if they're doing all of that, that's fine, even though they do tend to get a bit carried away. And I noticed that there were some marches. There was a march, actually, a very long march, started at 10 o'clock, still going on today, and it's now 4 o'clock in South Australia. But there's so they spent a lot of time out there marching around Melbourne. For what purpose at the end of the day, I don't know. Interestingly enough, they've had heaps of coverage on the ABC. They've been running it the whole day, and I imagine on other networks probably been doing exactly the same. So they're kind of getting their message out there that they are marching and that they're very good at it, and there's a lot of them. There'll be thousands of them, I would think, from the videos that we've seen. But I don't know what their purpose is at the end of the day, because they're not going to change the lockdown arrangements, and they're not going to affect the closures around building sites, which is supposedly what they're agitating for or against, and eventually it will all just be swallowed up into nothingness. And it's a lot like, why is it that we agitate in the way that we do to bring about significant change? Does it just provide a voice for all of us to talk about things that concern us? But the reality is that nothing happens, that nothing changes, that we yell, we scream, we shout. I've been watching, over the years, I watch a lot of YouTube media from either side, and networks, and CNN, MSNBC, Sky News, Fox News and so on. And I hear these people shouting and screaming, and it's kind of like the megaphone that they're using is pointed and directly just at this one audience who already believe what it is that they believe, and that they're not going to change any minds within their group. their tribe is going to believe whatever it is that they believe, and you're just feeding further information into that pit, from what I can understand. But nothing seems to significantly change. And I've often wondered what brings about change. So in order to change a system, we need to change the way people think about a particular issue. So climate change is a good example, I think, that as we become more and more aware of the issues around a heating climate, extreme weather conditions and so on, and that begins to impact us, then perhaps we might accept that climate change is a reality. The problem, I guess, with climate change in particular is that we won't be able to prevent it until perhaps it's too late. So creating the awareness and getting people to change their minds around that may be a futile effort, given that it may never, ever happen. And even though but there are significant changes. For example, the renewables are now outstripping the fossil fuel industry in terms of production and in terms of efficiency and a whole host of other things. So clearly there have been some significant changes. But has it really changed the minds of those people that make the decisions? Because at the end of the day, there are a whole lot of decisions that are made which have got nothing to do with the climate, which are all about perception, what their base is thinking, and the investments that people have in those ideas which are to foster their commercial interests. So that's a primary concern around a lot of decisions that are made. And that with regard to the vaccination, well, that's about public health interest, and majority of people clearly at the moment agree that vaccinations is a way out of the COVID pandemic. But there's still this little group, these group of people that want to hold on to what they believe are their sense of freedom. So their freedom to be able to do whatever it is that they believe that they should be able to do at the risk of the health of those people around them. And I guess there are some really interesting ideological ideas which come into play here and which kind of clash. You know, that right that a person has to decide, the freedom as to how they use their own body, the freedom to be able to wear a mask, freedom to take a jab in the arm, whatever it might be. And yet those same people would be standing up there saying, well, we believe that, that abortions should be excluded, or prohibited, that women should not have the right to be able to say what it is that they should do with their body, and that we need to make sure that those rights are prohibited. But our right, when it comes to things like vaccination, should be upheld. So these ideologies conflict within themselves, it seems to me, and it is rather distressing to think that those ideas tend to break out into a kind of a struggle that interrupts or corrupts even the systems in which they work. What brought me to this point was that I have been thinking about for a long time the efforts that we've put into child protection in this state and the responses that we've got. And I've got lots of people I know who are clients, who are other people I've just come in contact with, who have been battling with the issue around child protection for years and have seen the gross injustices that it does and the impact that it has on kids. And as much as we push against those people that operationalise that system, the more I become aware that until we can cause some sort of an awakening against a lot of these people, the same thing will happen. Yeah, for example, the amount of kids that are taken who are Indigenous is horrific. The percentage is unbelievably high given the number of Indigenous people that there are in our community. And so it is without doubt there are racist tendencies within the child protection system, and there are racist tendencies obviously within those people that run and operationalise those systems. So it is important, I think, for all of us I'll start again. I think it's important that we find a way to influence those people who finally make those decisions. But unfortunately, influencing any of those people would only occur if there were consequences for their behaviour. So the fact that we're locking up X amount of kids, we're taking them away from their families, that we're incarcerating so many young kids, particularly Indigenous kids, until there is a time when people understand there is a consequence from their behaviour, will anything change? It's like climate change. Until there is a time when our climate is so damaged that the bushfires and the droughts and the floods and all the other horrific stuff that comes with climate change, rising seawaters and so on. Once all of that stuff starts to happen, then perhaps, climate change, people around climate change might start to realise it. So what needs to happen around social issues in order for people to change their minds? Why is it that in some countries around the world, Scandinavian countries in particular, they have a much stronger social justice, community-based type systems that realise the benefits of community housing, of paying better benefits to people, looking after disabled, looking after the elderly, looking after the young, the adolescents, putting more services into mental health. Why is it? It isn't like we're all this way, because there are places around the world where an emphasis on these other areas is paramount. So what prevents us from doing that? And how long do we have to push before significant changes take place? Because I've been pushing for years for certain changes to take place structurally within our society, and I've had lots of other people supporting me around all of that, but nothing seems to happen. And there comes a point where I guess you start, well, I do anyway, I start to wonder, has any of this been worth it? Has, even in a micro level, occasions getting kids returned, people being able to talk to us about the issues that sit within their lives and finding ways to deal with all of that is helpful. I know, and I'm not discounting any of that. But in terms of the masses of people whose views need to change so that the general systems themselves improve, often to me seems futile. And it's depressing, because we do need these systems, or the people within these systems, to discover new ways of being, new ways of looking at problems. It's almost as if people have a template to how you resolve problems. And that template can go back hundreds of years, if you like, and it's the same old template. And we can't think outside that. We can't find different ways to be able to make life better for everybody. The universal basic income is something that potentially would save us a lot of money in terms of the types of services that we're now offering, that are expensive, that are heavy, cumbersome, and that perhaps there are other ways that we could do things, and the UBI is one of them. But we refuse to do anything about it because we just can't think outside that box, no matter how hard we try. Because I think to a large extent, We just don't have the courage to be different, to meet the challenges that we're having to face, or even to be creative. And because sometimes when you're creative, you receive some sort of backlash. And if you're creative, sometimes you will not always be successful. So it's like politicians in particular must always take what is the safe road. And that safe road is based on their template about how to do things so they don't get into trouble. And we need to make sure, though, we need to have politicians, I think, who are courageous, who are prepared to take risks, and who are prepared to accept that if those risks fail, then so be it, but there is another opportunity lies ahead. We don't have to stop there. So that's my thoughts. Thanks everybody for being with me. Take care of yourself, look after yourself, and more importantly, be safe.